Welcome to Spirits Podcast, a boozy dive into mythology, legends, and folklore. Every week, we pour a drink and learn about a new story from around the world. I'm Amanda.
And I'm Julia. Amanda, obviously, a movie that a lot of people are talking about, and I think are probably going to be talking about even more when it actually comes out. Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey.
I've been hearing about this for close to a year, Julia. I can't believe we're almost here. Big boat summer? Question mark?
Boat summer. All right. I'm into it. Look, I am always going to be a Greek mythology girly, right? And I would say that I like a lot of Christopher Nolan's movies, maybe not all of them, but I do think that he is a guy that can handle an epic pretty well. So I have been keeping an eye on a lot of the discussions around this movie since it was announced back at the end of 2024, before we really even knew anything about casting or really any details besides Christopher Nolan is doing an Odyssey movie. And I know that a lot of people who maybe aren't Greek mythology folks are going to go and see this movie because it's a Christopher Nolan movie and might not know what to expect going into it. For example, Jake and I have been seeing a lot of movies lately, and the trailer has been playing before a lot of those movies. And Jake looks at me every time and goes, "What's going on?" And I said, "Don't worry, I will explain it to you."
What's the plot? Oh, honey, shh.
Shh, I don't have 3 hours. Well, today we're going to try to not put it into 3 hours, but keep it in under 2 hours, hopefully. No, it won't be 2 hours, I promise. Today, though, I wanted to talk through sort of what to expect from seeing this Odyssey movie, the plot points to look out for, and then we're going to talk about what I'm hoping for in terms of this movie and what I'm expecting in Christopher Nolan's adaptation of it.
Welcome to What to Expect When You're Expecting, to spend 3.5 hours in an air-conditioned movie theater watching Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey.
Now, I did see Disclosure Day last night at the time of recording this, and I saw it in Dolby Atmos, which I haven't seen a Dolby Atmos movie in I don't even remember how long. And the trailer for The Odyssey came up, and I said, I might actually go see this in IMAX. I don't think I've seen an IMAX movie since the first Avatar movie came out.
Wow.
Hey, I think it'll be good. I think it genuinely will be good.
Bold. I'm really excited, Julia. I am excited to know a little bit more than the average moviegoer about who Lupita Nyong'o is playing.
The answer is 2 people.
Incredible. Why Anne Hathaway look like that? Armor question mark? Who is Matt Damon? We're going to answer all those questions today.
We are. We're going to answer as many of these questions as we possibly can at the end of this episode, because we are going to briefly talk a little about what the Odyssey story is, what Christopher Nolan is specifically basing his movie off of, and then we're going to go through the plot of the Odyssey, which will be a good portion of this episode. And then I will try to answer any questions, any lingering questions you have, Amanda, at the end.
Let's do it.
First things first, a lot of what we're going to be talking about is from Emily Wilson's translation of The Odyssey. If you are a Greek mythology person and you have not read that yet, or if it's like something that interests you after seeing this movie, it is well worth your time. She handles the translation with such beauty, but it also has an accessibility that I really appreciate because translation is incredible, in my opinion. I think it is absolutely a superpower that people spend their lives like learning ancient Greek and then learning how best to beautifully translate that into English and other languages. Emily Wilson, I think, does a fantastic job with that.
Yeah, saying things like, "What's up, bro?" and "Let's freaking go." Making the ancient text relevant and legible to people who are living right now, which is absolutely the way I prefer my translations.
Yes, and obviously Christopher Nolan thought so as well, because he has based a lot of the choices that he made in the movie on Emily Wilson's translation. He and Matt Damon, who is playing Odysseus, have specifically mentioned this translation in interviews for this movie.
Let's freaking go. I mean, Hollywood folks going as deep as who the translator was on their source material. I don't know, Julia. I kind of love it.
I'm super into it, too. I really, really love it. So in terms of what the Odyssey is, if you can't sort of look at it and guess it from watching the trailers for these movies, the Odyssey is the story of a man who is attempting to get home after 20 years. First, because he is fighting in the Trojan War, but then through a series of God and natural related misfortunes. But this is also not only Odysseus' story, but it is also the story of his wife, who is attempting to remain faithful to him as she is bombarded with suitors. And it is also the story of his son, who is trying to find his place in the world and battling with the legacy of a father that he never really knew, who may or may not be dead. The stakes are not just Odysseus's alone. They are Penelope's and they are Telemachus's too.
Love it.
What I think is interesting about the Odyssey as a whole is that these three characters all contain many sides to themselves. And you'll see that as we go through the plot points of the story. But I really love this line describing Odysseus from Emily Wilson, which is, quote, Odysseus himself seems to contain multitudes. He is a migrant, a pirate, a carpenter, a king, an athlete, a beggar, a husband, a lover, a father, a son, a fighter, a liar, a leader, and a thief. He is a man who cries, takes naps, and feels homesick, but he is also a man who has a special relationship with the goddess who transforms his appearance at will and ensures that his schemes succeed.
Fascinating.
Oh, God, I love it. It's so good. It's so good. Another thing that I think it is also important to note about this poem and about the story that you are probably going to see on screen is that Odysseus does some pretty heinous shit in this story, as do many of the characters, honestly.
A fair disclaimer for almost all of Greek mythology, of which this is a part.
Yes, but we also have to keep in mind that in terms of telling the story, Odysseus is the hero of his own story here. The poem glorifies some of what he does, even if we're going to give like a little bit more of a side eye to some of the other stuff. But there are times in which the poem makes the audience question whether or not what he did was truly right, or if his actions are problematic, right? And so as we go through the story, we have to remind ourselves that while Odysseus is our protagonist, he's also deeply flawed in the way that Greek mythology loves to present characters to us. There can be no hubris if the mortals of the stories, or sometimes even the gods themselves, are faultless. I'm sure we're going to have a lot more to say about Odysseus as a character as we kind of go on. And Amanda, I encourage you to ask questions about the motivations of the characters as we go. But I think from here, we should just get to the plot of it all. So let's start, Amanda, with the beginning, which is, tell me about a complicated man. Muse, tell me how he wandered and was lost when he had wrecked the holy town of Troy, and where he went and who he met, the pain he suffered in the storms at sea, and how he worked to save his life and bring his men back home. He failed to keep them safe, poor fools. They ate the sun god's cattle, and the god kept them from home. Now, goddess, child of Zeus, tell the old story for our modern times. Find the beginning. A lot of people stop there, but I'm going to give you the opening lines right after that, which is, all the Greeks who survived the brutal sack of Troy sailed safely home to their own wives, except this man alone. Calypso, the great goddess, had trapped him in her cave. She wanted him to be her husband. When the year rolled round in which the gods decreed he should go home to Ithaca, his troubles still went on.
Odysseus alone, right? He's set apart.
Yes. So first off, the Odyssey is broken up traditionally into 24 books. In most tellings of the story, the 24th chapter is pretty much completely omitted. We'll talk about that when we get to the end of the story itself. These are essentially like chapters in our modern understanding, not like books themselves, but rather, you know, when you're reading a really long book and they break it up into like book 1, book 2, book 3 within the book itself. That's what we're dealing with here. And I think it would surprise most people to know that not only does the Odyssey start sort of in the middle of Odysseus' story, it also does not start with Odysseus.
Oh, really?
In fact, he doesn't even appear in the text really until book 5.
That does surprise me. I mean, God's on page 1 of the Bible, Julia.
That is true. Now, we do instead start the story first with this council of Olympian gods who have gathered while Poseidon is essentially distracted feasting in Ethiopia.
I mean, Julia, have you eaten Ethiopian food? I too would be distracted and feasting in Ethiopia given the chance.
I get it. So Athena uses this opportunity to appeal to her father Zeus to allow Odysseus to return home, revealing that he has been trapped on the island of the nymph Calypso, who wishes to keep him there as her immortal husband. Now, Zeus at this point agrees to send Hermes to Calypso to appeal to the nymph to release Odysseus. And in the meantime, Athena goes to Ithaca, which is Odysseus's home, disguised as Odysseus's old friend Mentor, which is where we get the word mentor from.
What?
Mm-hmm.
Whoa.
So there, she finds Odysseus's halls have been overrun by these men, the suitors, who wish to marry Penelope, who is Odysseus's wife, in his absence. It is pretty much assumed that Odysseus is dead at this point. I want to call out the actors so that people know who's who as they're watching the movie. Penelope, played by Anne Hathaway in this.
Hell yeah.
So his son, Telemachus, who is played by Tom Holland, has been unable to control the suitors, who are basically taking advantage of the divine hospitality that, as we've talked about many times in Greek mythology, hosts are required to pay to their guests. Now, Telemachus has also been convinced that his father is dead, never going to return, but while talking to Athena, who is, again, disguised as Mentor, she convinces him to stand up to the suitors and that his father will eventually return.
And just for everybody out there, don't worry, it is Zendaya playing Athena.
It is indeed. It is indeed. Great casting. I'm stoked about that personally.
Can't wait.
So she then, after is like, your father's going to return, reveals her divinity to him by transforming into a bird and flying away.
Huge.
So at the feast that the suitors are essentially throwing for themselves, right? There is a singer named Phemius who begins to sing a song about the Trojan War. And hearing the song, Penelope, Odysseus' wife, appears, comes downstairs, makes her face known. So essentially, Penelope has been veiled this entire time. She has not revealed her beauty to the suitors, and she doesn't until the end of the poem. But she's essentially not spending any time with these suitors, really.
She doesn't want to get married. She's like, I have a husband, don't know if he's dead or alive, but way too soon, all of you.
But she also has to entertain this idea of getting married because Ithaca needs a king, essentially.
Right.
So Penelope appears to the suitors and tries to make Phemius stop his song because she is upset at the reminder that Odysseus still has not returned, and it's a reminder of how badly she misses him. And surprisingly, Telemachus sort of scolds her and tells her to return upstairs, which she does. There's a lot of interiority to Penelope. We never quite know what she's thinking. The poem never truly addresses her thoughts and interiority, but there is very much an implied interiority to who she is and what she is thinking during the story.
And that is why there is a whole genre, basically, of books in the tradition and sort of represented of the Penelopiad by Margaret Atwood, where it's she has a whole world. We don't quite know what's going on in there. Let's figure what's happening in Penelope's head.
Exactly. So Telemachus scolds her, tells her to return upstairs. She does. And then he announces that he's going to be calling a meeting with the suitors as well as the elite of Ithaca the next day. Now, at this point, we meet two of the main suitors who are going to play a big role in the rest of the Odyssey. That is Antinous and Eurymachus, who both mock and dismiss Telemachus, and then also attempt to find out who the stranger, the disguised Athena, was. But Telemachus, knowing that it is a goddess, does not reveal her true identity to the suitors.
Telemachus makes a series of good decisions at important moments in the Odyssey.
It's a mixed bag, I would say, with Telemachus. His whole thing is he is trying to be the man of the house in his father's place and has a very difficult position to find himself in. One, as someone who did not grow up with his father, only his father's legacy. And two, in a hall surrounded by all of these much more willful men who are trying to take his place in the household.
Mm-hmm.
So the next day, Telemachus calls this assembly, and it is attended not only by the suitors, but also the elite of Ithaca, where Telemachus calls out the trouble that the suitors have been causing. Now, Antinous, who is sort of the unofficial leader of the suitors, blames Penelope and reveals that she has been tricking them. And here's the quote. "Go blame your precious mother. She is cunning. It is the 3rd year, soon it will be 4, that she has cheated us of what we want. She offers hope to all, sends notes to each, but all the while her mind moves somewhere else. She came up with a special trick. She fixed a mighty loom inside the palace hall. Weaving her fine, long cloth, she said to us, "Young men, you are my suitors. Since my husband, the brave Odysseus, is dead, I know you want to marry me. You must be patient. I have worked hard to weave this winding sheet to bury good Laertes when he dies." Now, Laertes, Odysseus' father, still alive, but she's weaving this cloth anyway. So every day she wove the mighty cloth, and then at night by torchlight she unwove it. For 3 long years her trick beguiled the Greeks. But when the 4th year's seasons rolled around, a woman slave who knew the truth told us. We caught her there unraveling the cloth and made her finish it.
Brutal.
So Telemachus, the suitors are yelling at him. They're saying, "Your mom's an asshole. You're an asshole. This is terrible." So Telemachus claims that the gods will give him recompense for what the suitors have done to him thus far. And in that moment, Zeus sends down 2 eagles that start to attack the suitors. There is an Ithacan elder who at this point claims that this is a prophecy, a sign from the gods that Odysseus is going to return home soon.
Helpful. Thank you, Zeus.
There we go. There we go. At this point, Telemachus is like, well, if that's true, and this is a sign of the gods, then I'm going to go and seek out news about my father. And basically asks both the suitors and the royals of Ithaca, saying like, hey, it would be nice if I had a ship that I could travel for news with, you know? And so he prays to Athena, who appears to him again in this form of mentor, and promises that she's going to help him out and get him a ship to sail on. Telemachus at this point hosts one more dinner with the suitors, who were not really all scared off by this sign of Zeus being attacked by 2 eagles, and they mock Telemachus. They're constantly just mocking Telemachus, you know?
Julia, do we know who's playing these suitors? Because I'm very excited for this, just like bro time heckling poor Tom Holland.
We do know that Antinous is played by Robert Pattinson.
Oh, shit.
And then the other main suitor is Eurymachus, who I believe is being played by Corey Hawkins.
All right.
At this point, he's being mocked by the suitors. They're starting to go and do their own thing. And so he slips out of Ithaca secretly, and he goes to the shore where Athena has prepared a ship and a crew for him to set sail with. Now, his first stop is Pylos, which is ruled by the elderly King Nestor. Nestor warmly welcomes Telemachus and tells Telemachus, and in classic sort of poem style, the audience, about how the Greeks destroyed Troy and desecrated the temple of Athena, which is what led to the goddess cursing them. Now, torn between attempting to appease Athena and returning home while they still could, the 2 brothers and the leaders of the Greeks at the time in the Trojan War, who were Agamemnon, who is the husband of Clytemnestra, and Menelaus, who is the husband of Helen.
Julia, there has never been a larger disconnect in my mind of excitement between John Bernthal, who's playing Menelaus, and weirdly, Benny Safdie, for some reason in an on-screen role playing Agamemnon.
What I think is really interesting, too, is I mentioned Clytemnestra here, and I mentioned Helen. We'll talk more about them sort of as we go on in the story. Helen famously is the one who the Trojan War was fought over, right?
Face that launched 1,000 ships.
Christopher Nolan has done something beautiful here, which is Helen and Clytemnestra are twins. So he has double casted Lupita Nyong'o as Clytemnestra and Helen.
Fuck yeah, dude. I'm so excited. It sucks that so many trolls are being such a bitch about historical accuracy when, number one, Black people existed before white people. And secondly, Greek people were not all white. And third, this is a work of fiction. I
literally already talked about Ethiopia earlier on. And while Lupita is a Kenyan actress, that's still like dark-skinned African people.
Just saying.
So Agamemnon and Menelaus argue over what to do in terms of whether or not to appease Athena after they have upset her, right? So they decide to split their troops up, and in the process, the Greek fleet is scattered upon their return home. Nestor manages to get home safely, but he tells Telemachus how Agamemnon was killed by Clytemnestra's lover when he returned home, and then Menelaus was swept to Egypt by a storm, but has since managed to return home to Sparta as well. So he specifically warns Telemachus about Agamemnon's fate, implying that the suitors might do to him what was done to Agamemnon. He then tells Telemachus, hey, you should go visit Menelaus next, but then you should return back to keep an eye on your household. And then Nestor insists, in proper hospitality form, that Telemachus stay the night. And then when he leaves the next day, it is with many gifts, as well as Pisistratus, who is Nestor's own son, to take as a companion.
That's real hospitality. Like, oh, my kid will take you up there. Don't worry.
Exactly, especially since Nestor lost, I think, at least one or two sons during the Trojan War. So to trust Telemachus enough to send his other surviving son with him is a sign of like strong respect. So the two find themselves soon after in Sparta, in the halls of Menelaus and Helen, who are in the middle of the wedding festivities for both of Menelaus's children. One is with Helen, their daughter Hermione. The other is a son who was born of a like concubine slave of Menelaus's. Now, despite having presumably interrupted two weddings, they are greeted warmly and welcomed into the halls, and Menelaus tells the story of his return from Troy and specifically expresses remorse for the lives that were lost on the journey, specifically Agamemnon's, but also presumably Odysseus's, which causes Telemachus to begin crying. And at this point, Telemachus has not been like, it's me, Telemachus, the son of Odysseus. He's just like, I am a traveler wanting to ask you questions. And he's like, okay, sure thing. At this point, their conversation is interrupted by the arrival of Helen, who immediately recognizes Telemachus as Odysseus's son. Now, Pisistratus reveals that they have come for news of Odysseus, and Helen offers them essentially like a magical drug that is mixed with wine, which is supposed to remove the capacity for grief from the drinker.
Oh, damn.
Now, Helen being the one to do this after being, you know, essentially kidnapped, essentially manipulated by Aphrodite into marrying another man, leaving her husband, leaving her household, having a war fought over her for a decade or so. That implies so fucked up of a thing that she is just like, I need to remove these memories of all of the terrible things that happened to me. Would you like to also do that, Telemachus?
Yeah, man. And again, as a human artifact of storytelling and working through shit that we think is important, man, oh man, has the question of like, is it better to live with the grief of losing something meaningful than not at all? That has been occupying us since about as long as we've been humans.
Yes. And I think a lot of times Helen is sort of portrayed as this like vain, sort of thoughtless woman. And she has so much interiority than that. It's so good.
Very excited for this performance.
At this point, both Menelaus and Helen share stories of Odysseus during the war. Like Helen specifically talks about a spy mission that he took a part of where he disguised himself and snuck into the walled city. And then Menelaus tells a story about like the Trojan horse and Odysseus's role in it. At this point, Menelaus, before Telemachus departs, tells him how on his own voyage home and like how during it, he managed to capture the god Proteus, who is like known as like the old man of the sea. And he gave him the news sort of about his fellow warriors. So he's the one that tells Menelaus about Agamemnon's death, but he also tells him about a vision of Odysseus being trapped on Calypso's island.
Hey, helpful and correct.
It is. It's helpful information. So meanwhile, while Telemachus is trying to return home from Sparta, the suitors have discovered that he is missing, and they find out where he has gone to, what his mission was. And so they begin to scheme to kill Telemachus when he returns. Essentially, they're like, we're just going to ambush him and then we'll kill him.
Yeah, and I'm sure all of these suitors want their own bloodline to inherit the throne and not Odysseus's kid.
So Penelope finds out about this plan and is devastated, but she is then comforted when Athena sends her this sort of like prophetic dream spirit that is like, it's okay, your husband's going to come home, your son will be safe, the gods have decreed it.
Shout out.
Now at this point, we're left on a little bit of a cliffhanger with the suitors getting ready to ambush Telemachus. Because then we cut to Zeus and Athena again discussing the fate of Odysseus. And Zeus gives her permission to protect Telemachus from the suitors, and then sends Hermes to Calypso to arrange Odysseus to be freed. And at this point, here's where we are introduced to the nymph Calypso. There sat Calypso with her braided curls. Beside the hearth, a mighty fire was burning. The scent of citrus and of brittle pine suffused the island. Inside, she was singing and weaving with a shuttle made of gold, and her voice was beautiful.
Julia, who is that beautiful voice coming out of?
That is coming out of Charlize Theron.
Yay!
Now, looking here and being like, braided curls, not what I think of when I think of Charlize Theron, but hey, listen, I didn't cast the movie. That's just me.
She has shaved her head for so many roles that I can imagine her in any or no hair.
Fair enough, fair enough. So Hermes greets Calypso, but notices that Odysseus is not there. And that is because, as the poem says, quote, "But Hermes did not find Odysseus, since he was sitting by the shore as usual, sobbing in grief and pain. His heart was breaking. In tears, he stared across the fruitless sea."
Oh, man. So probably we're going to see Matt Damon for the first time in the movie in this context. Wouldn't you think?
Now, that is a great question. I don't know if Christopher Nolan is going to necessarily follow the timeline of the poem itself, or if he's going to try to tell the story more linearly.
Christopher Nolan, not generally a guy known for linear storytelling, but we'll see. He does love to mess with the timeline.
We'll see. It's going to be like a good 30 minutes then before we see Matt Damon, which feels crazy to me personally. I'm
kind of into it. You know, I love in a movie where the title card doesn't come until 15 or 20 or 25 minutes in. I'm into it.
I agree with you. I just don't know if that's the choice he's going to make. We'll see.
Well, why is Odysseus sitting on the shore crying? Is it just the general context of his life or something specific?
It's been a rough one, and we'll talk about why it's been a rough one for him specifically. But at this point, it's been not quite 20 years yet that he has been away from home.
Wow.
So at this point, Hermes tells Calypso that she must release Odysseus. She specifically lashes out. She claims that she saved Odysseus and that the gods always get angry when goddesses take mortal men as lovers, but the gods are allowed to take whatever mortals they please as lovers.
Wow, the double standard exists as far back as we distinguished genders.
Yeah, she's like, you guys did the same thing about Orion. You did the same thing with one of Demeter's lovers. It's like you guys just kill any mortal man that any goddess wants to take up with. And then you're out here spawning any kid that you could possibly make. What's up with that?
No notes.
Because it was ordered by Zeus, she reluctantly agrees. So she seeks out Odysseus and instructs him to build a raft to get home, though he's like, you want me to go out onto the ocean on a raft? Seems like you're scheming against me. I don't trust that. Which, to be fair, at this point in the story, it makes sense for him not to trust that. At this point, she tries one last time to convince him to stay and become her immortal husband. So essentially, she's like, stay on this island with me. You'll live forever and you'll be my husband. And he's like, no, I have to return home to Penelope. I really that's my wife, even though he and Calypso have been maintaining this sexual relationship. So in the end, Odysseus builds the raft. Calypso lets him go and he sails on it for 17 days. She gives him stuff, though. It's there's wine and there's water. It's okay. But on the 18th day, Poseidon spots his raft on the sea and, enraged, sends a storm that wrecks the raft. Luckily for him, he is a favorite of Athena, and so Athena manipulates the winds so that they deliver him to the mouth of a gentle river. Athena then visits the dreams of a princess of the land that Odysseus landed on, which is the land of Phaeacia, and this princess's name is Nausicaa. And so Athena convinces her to, the next day, go to the river with her ladies to do laundry.
It's giving Moses and his adoptive family. Love it.
So at this point, too, Nausicaa is promised to be married to someone else. That's important. And so as she is down at the river doing laundry, she and her ladies are playing games. And at one point they lose their ball. And then just like out of a bush pops up Odysseus with the ball.
Like, don't worry, guys, I got it.
And so being discovered by these ladies, he appeals to Nausicaa for help. And she provides him with clothes that she was washing and then instructs him on how to get to the palace. But she's like, you can't come with us because, again, I am unmarried. I'm soon to be married. I can't be just like associated with a man that I found in a bush.
Sure. Yeah, fair.
So she returns home. Odysseus enters the town. And when he gets into the town, he is guided by this young girl who is Athena in disguise.
I am so excited to see Zendaya play all of these versions of Athena in disguise. I don't know if they're going to get different actors, if it's going to be her in costume, but I'm here for it.
Yes, I think it's going to be interesting. I bet it's going to be different actors, and then you just like have a shot where all of a sudden it's Zendaya. So she leads Odysseus to the palace, and when he enters, he is welcomed by the king and queen, with the queen specifically noticing, like, you're wearing clothes that I made myself. And so Odysseus is like, yes, your daughter Nausicaa assisted me. And they're like, oh, well, if she assisted you, then we are going to offer you hospitality. You have a bed for the night, and we will plan a feast in your honor the following day.
Weirdly went well.
Well, usually does. Remember, like, the Greeks are very about hospitality, which is what makes the suitors so, like, terrible in this story, is that they are taking advantage of the hospitality, right?
Got it.
So at this feast the next day, a blind poet named Demodocus sings a song about an argument that was had during the Trojan War between Odysseus and Achilles, which, listening to this, causes Odysseus to begin weeping.
Sure.
And they're like, weird. The guest is not enjoying the song, so let's sing a different song. And so the poet instead sings another song, this time about the affair between Ares and Aphrodite.
Much better.
Which Odysseus is pleased by, which I think is interesting because there are parallels to be drawn between Aphrodite and Ares' affair and what I think he is worried about in terms of leaving Penelope alone for as long as he has. So the next song that Demodocus sings was actually a request from Odysseus himself, where he requests a song about the Trojan horse.
He's like, hey, play my hits, please.
But as Demodocus begins to sing it, he starts desperately crying again. And so they're like, strange response to these songs. So the king is like, hey, buddy, who are you that you're reacting like this?
Yeah.
And so he reveals to the audience and to the king that he is Odysseus and what has happened to him since the sacking of Troy.
Damn.
And this is crazy, Amanda, because so much of what we think as the Odyssey is just a flashback of Odysseus's own retelling of what happened to him up until the point we go and see him at Calypso's island.
Oh, shit. So this is where he's like, let me tell you what all has happened to me. And he's like sitting there sobbing. Everyone in court is really awkwardly hearing his story. The singer is like, I guess I'll stop. And then that's the rest of the Odyssey?
Well, it's most of the rest of the Odyssey.
Whoa. I had no idea.
Mm-hmm.
Nolan loves a frame narrative, and we got one here, baby.
And that's exactly what this is. So the next, 3 book/chapters are the story of what happened to Odysseus between Troy and winding up where Hermes found him on Calypso's island.
Whoa.
And we will pick up there just as soon as we grab our refill, because, oh boy, are we going to need it.
I'm parched.
Hey, it's Julia, and welcome to The Refill. Thank you so much to our newest patrons, Milo, Leilu, and Jesse. You join the ranks of our supporting producer-level patrons like Alicia, Hannah, Scott, and Matthew, Lily, and Will, and of course, our legend-level patrons, Captain Jonathan Malachi Cosmos, Audra, Sarah, Beam Me Up Scotty, Morgan, Rico-like, Chibi Yokai, and Smoliv. And if you'd like cool rewards like ad-free episodes, recipe cards for every single episode, bonus urban legends each and every month, go to patreon.com/spiritspodcast to check out the 7-day free trial. Again, that is patreon.com/spiritspodcast. I'm also here to tell you about another show here at Multitude, Pale Blue Pod. Pale Blue Pod is an astronomy podcast for people who are overwhelmed by the universe, but still want to be its friend. I have been craving kind of space-themed stuff lately. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because I saw Disclosure Day recently. I don't know. But Pale Blue Pod always scratches that itch for me. Astrophysicist Dr. Moya McTeer and her best friend Constar demystify space one topic at a time with open eyes, open arms, and open mouths from so much laughing and jaw-dropping. By the end of each episode, the cosmos will feel a little less scary and a lot more cool. They have new episodes every Monday wherever you listen to your podcasts. Go ahead and check it out. And now, let's get back to the show. Amanda, we are back, and I think because this is a long tale and one that, you have to keep telling and you might get parched in the middle of, I think a nice wine just to sip on to quench your thirst before you continue is the perfect way to honor the telling of the Odyssey.
I think this is perfect. Is there a particular grape or style, Julia, that you would recommend I bring with me on my raft in the middle of the ocean for 17 days until Poseidon feels like an itch between his shoulder blades and then is like, fuck?
I think a chilled red wine is how I would go about this.
Love.
So, like a classic Pinot Noir is kind of like a light enough wine that if you chill it, it's going to be nice. Anything that's light or medium bodied, I think is a perfect sort of accompaniment to the story.
I'll just sort of trail it in its little hemp bag from the raft to keep it ocean temperature.
There you go.
Yeah.
So surprising no one, Odysseus got into a lot of shit after leaving Troy, and a lot of it will make you feel like maybe he kind of deserved it a little bit.
Sure.
So first things first, they are blown off course as soon as they leave Troy, again, because Athena was upset with them. And they wind up in the land of the Cicones, who had sided with the Trojans during the war. Which I guess is why Odysseus and his men decide that they are going to sack the city that they come across, killing all of the men that they can find and taking the women as concubines.
Nothing sort of deserves that response, but I do see under their logic why they would go in that direction.
But also what's really interesting is the way that the story tells this. It's not politically motivated. It's just this is the people they came across and that's what they did to them. So they end up staying there for a while. They get themselves mad drunk while they're there, which is what makes it really easy for the remaining people to retaliate and kill a bunch of Odysseus's men before they are able to get to their ships and flee. So once they are back on the ocean, they are once again struck by another storm, which washes them onto the shore of the land of the Lotus Eaters, who are a land of people who eat lotus fruits in order to essentially magically forget their troubles.
We see this theme coming up again and again.
So they convince some of Odysseus's men to eat the fruit as well, which makes them forget all about their homes and their desire to return home. But fortunately for Odysseus, he does not partake in the fruit and then orders all of his men back onto the ship.
Julia, is Odysseus uncommonly a wife guy? How is his fidelity to Penelope, or at least his desire to get home? Is it more of I love my wife and I want to be together? Or is it this is my, property, my right, my dynasty, my family, this is what I fought for?
I think it is a mix of both. I think that we tend to, in modern telling, sort of assign a certain, I guess, we've been talking a lot about Arthur in our other episodes, and I think we tend to assign the chivalry of capital R romance to Odysseus, and it's not quite that. He has several sexual relationships with other women in the course of his return back to Ithaca. And so there is that double standard expectation of Penelope cannot sleep with another man while Odysseus is also having sexual relationships with other women. So it is a mix of both. I do think he genuinely does care about Penelope. And I think also that's why Christopher Nolan chose to do the story, because I think Christopher Nolan definitely sees himself as a wife guy. He loves a dead wife in a lot of his stories because I think his wife is very important to him. And also, I think she's the editor for every single one of his movies. So fun little detail for you.
Lots to unpack there, Julia. Lots to unpack. Maybe we can review the movie after we see it on the Patreon. So come on over, patreon.com/spiritspodcast, and you'll see what we thought.
There you go. So the desire to get back home, I think, is a certain manliness as well. There is like in the Iliad, which is the story of the Trojan War, there is a lot of comparison made between Achilles and Odysseus, and how Achilles like achieves this sort of like epitome of manliness by staying in the war when he has the opportunity to return back to his like dying father and son, and chooses not to do that. Whereas Odysseus is like, I need to survive so I can go home to my son and wife.
Fascinating.
Yeah, interesting, right? So we leave the land of the Lotus Eaters. The next island that they end up on is the island of the Cyclopses, where they enter a cave that is inhabited by a lone Cyclops, a shepherd named Polyphemus, who is the son of Poseidon. Now, remember when we said, oh, Poseidon sensed Odysseus on the waves and then said, fuck that?
Yep.
You're going to find out why he said, fuck that.
Oh, good. I thought Poseidon just kind of stayed mad generally, but he has some specific beef with Odysseus, I guess.
No, sometimes Poseidon's nice, but he has specific beef with Odysseus. That is saying it lightly. So Odysseus takes a small amount of men with him and a special sack of like super, super high proof wine, and then goes to visit the giant Cyclops, Polyphemus. But they go to his cave and they find that he isn't there. So they break in, and the men immediately bad because, again, hospitality, guys.
Yeah, you can't just like leave a note, hang out. It's not like you've been gone for many years and just like have a couple days to spare.
Yeah. So they break in, and Odysseus' men want to like steal supplies and get out of there before Polyphemus returns. However, Odysseus is like, no, we must stay. Polyphemus returns, and Odysseus is like, I would like a gift. I'm your guest now.
I think you stole the gift.
I think you broke into this guy's cave, my guy. Polyphemus refuses, and as an extra fuck you, eats 2 of Odysseus' men.
I mean, listen, I am going to take the side of the Cyclops in most stories, Julia, including this one.
He also traps them in the cave because he has like a rock that he rolls in front of the cave entrance so that the sheep don't escape in the middle of the night.
Got it.
And also keeps these men trapped in there.
Helpful.
He then goes to sleep. Odysseus and his men try to move the rock, too heavy for them to move. So the next morning, Polyphemus wakes up, eats 2 more guys, and then he takes the sheep to the pasture and then rolls the rock back into place so that Odysseus and his crew are stuck in this cave. So Odysseus, in the meantime, we're kind of waiting for Polyphemus to come back, starts to carve a stake out of olive wood to stab the giant at some point, right?
I really want to see Matt Damon just like angrily whittling, like sitting in the cave, like, fuck this, fuck that. You guys are idiots. Down 4 men, whittle, whittle, whittle.
Yes. By the way, Polyphemus is going to be played by Bill Irwin in the movie.
Oh, sick.
At this point, Polyphemus comes back after a day of being a shepherd and eats 2 more men in the process. We're up to 6 at this point. And at this point, Odysseus is like, you know what? I fucked up. Why don't you have some of this special wine that we brought with me? Good. Isn't this wine great?
Let's start over.
So the wine gets Polyphemus extremely drunk, right? And he's like, oh, who do I thank for this wonderful wine that I'm drinking? And Odysseus introduces himself as Metis, which is usually translated into English as no man or nobody.
Huh.
Which is interesting because Metis, if we're like literally translating it, can mean nobody, 100%. But it also can be translated as cunning. So the drink makes Polyphemus pass out, and then Odysseus stabs him through his single eye. Polyphemus wakes up because he just got stabbed in the eye, and he cries out for help, but no one else on the island comes to help him because essentially what he is yelling is that nobody hurt me or no man hurt me.
Oh, shit. That's diabolical. Fuck.
So the next morning, a blinded Polyphemus must take his sheep out to pasture, right? So he moves the stone and he starts counting the sheep with his hands in order to make sure they all get out. And at this point, Odysseus and his men manage to escape because they cling to the sheep's bellies in order to avoid detection. And at that point, they just kind of sprint back to the ship where the rest of the men are.
A real self self-created L for the crew of the Odyssey.
100%.
Really bad.
There are a lot of self-created L's for Odysseus and his crew in the story.
That's a real own goal, Julia.
I know.
Oh.
So they manage to get to their ship and sail away. And Odysseus, in this moment of hubris, taunts Polyphemus and reveals his true name to Polyphemus.
Why? Why are we giving out the true name?
Silly. So Polyphemus hurls a giant rock at the ship, which nearly destroys the ship, manages to not, and then calls out to his father Poseidon to curse Odysseus.
Yeah, like, oh, let me take this beef to my daddy, the sea god.
Yes, and that's why Poseidon has beef with Odysseus and refuses to let him return home.
It's like pissing off the one kid in high school whose dad's a lawyer. You're just like, fuck.
Damn. So at this point, Odysseus has a fleet of ships with him, right? And the fleet stops at the floating island of Aeolus, who is the guardian of the winds. And he gives Odysseus a bag that contains multiple different winds, right? He's like, this is a great gift for a sailor. You can use it to get home easier. Like, worst case scenario, if the winds stop blowing, he can just open this bag and blow the ship in the direction that they need to go.
Ideal. Thank you.
However, as they are nearly back to Ithaca, Odysseus is on the rudder of the ship and he falls asleep. Some of his men, who have become jealous of these treasures that Odysseus is accumulating, which they felt are not being equally shared, including this bag that Aeolus gifted Odysseus, want a part of it. They want their fair share of the prizes that are being had here, right? They don't know what is in this bag. They just know that Odysseus was gifted it by a god. And so they go to open the bag of winds, and the winds blast them far from Ithaca.
Damn, dude. Is this portrayed as a failure of Odysseus's leadership, or like trouble within your house in sort of like the theme of the suitors taking advantage of hospitality?
It's sort of a mix of both. I think it is like a lot of times, and this is something that a later like prophecy that is given to Odysseus, you have to control your own urges and the urges of your men in order to make it back home.
Got it.
And so in this case, by falling asleep literally at the wheel,
Literally,
he manages to not control the urges of his men, and that is what sets them back.
Oof, bummer, man.
To know that like Ithaca was in sight and then get blasted to the other side of the fucking Aegean Sea is wild.
I also got to be honest with you, Julia, that I am picturing Ithaca, New York every time you say the word Ithaca. And I'm you're right. I'd be very pissed if I was driving for so long through Western New York and Ithaca's right there. And then I get yeeted into Pennsylvania.
Exactly. You get yeeted all the way back to Long Island. Not good. A bad time.
No.
So they land after the bag of wind incident on an island that are full of cannibal giants.
Oh, yeah. This is a good chapter.
Basically, the cannibal giants, to make a long story short, devour the entire fleet except for Odysseus's ship, because his ship doesn't get pushed into the harbor. It like sort of hits doldrums outside of the land. So all the others land and then immediately get eaten by a bunch of cannibal giants.
Good to be the caboose sometimes. I'm always saying this.
So the next island that they land on is the island of the goddess and sorceress Circe.
Mm-hmm.
Now, she sort of like welcomes some of the men in as they're exploring the island, and she feeds them a potion that makes them forget about their homes and then transforms them into pigs.
Incredible.
Now, one of the men manages to escape because he's like, I don't know about all this. All the islands we've landed on so far have not been a good time for us. So I'm not going to go to this goddess's feast who I don't know. So he goes back and he informs the rest of the crew. And with the help of Hermes, Odysseus is able to convince Circe to return the pig crew members back into humans. And they end up sort of staying on this island with Circe for a year. Odysseus has another sexual relationship with Circe, and he and his men sort of like stay there in order to recuperate.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the year, he asks Circe for assistance in returning home. And she's like, I'm not going to help you return home, but if you want some assistance, I suggest that you visit the land of the dead Hades, in order to seek out the spirit of the prophet Tiresias, who will be able to give you advice on how best to return back to Ithaca.
Is this as crazy in context as it seems? It feels to me like going to the land of the dead can only be worse than like sailing around and hoping to eventually land where you have to land.
Yeah, I think it's like at this point, he's like, we've gone through so much. And she's like, yeah, I know. It's because you pissed off the gods and you need to now know what you have to do in order to not piss the gods off any further.
Has to break the cycle a bit. Yeah.
I think there's a great line in there where she says, you have to leave it in the gods' hands at this point. You've been doing too much, essentially.
Stand down, Odysseus.
So Odysseus takes his ship. He doesn't like quite travel to the underworld, like to Hades as we imagine it. He goes to this sort of like misty, shadowy, sort of not quite into the land of the dead, but he's not like crossing the river Styx, right?
Christopher Nolan loves a misty beach. And I'm going to tell you right now, Julia, but it's a misty beach.
100%. So this is called the land of the Cimmerians. And while he's there, he makes this offering. So essentially, he digs a ditch and then he fills it with sacrificial blood, not human blood.
Sure.
Sacrificial blood. And that is what attracts the spirits of the dead. So he's kind of like going fishing, essentially, for these spirits, right? And he sees the spirits of several men that he knew. One of the men who died, who's like, give me a proper burial. He's like, I'll do that. He sees the spirit of his own mother while he's there.
Damn.
He sees the spirit of, I believe, Agamemnon and Achilles. But he's like, I can't talk to any of these people, as tempting as it is. He has to speak to the spirit of Tiresias first.
Okay, we're resisting some temptations.
There we go. So the spirit of Tiresias warns Odysseus that if he wants to return home, he has to control his urges as well as the urges of his men. And he specifically warns about not eating the cattle of Helios. And he warns him about the suitors that are waiting for him back in Ithaca.
Very helpful. Sounds like if we just follow the advice of this god who is very helpfully telling us exactly what we have to know, Julia, surely there's like 1 to 2 more books of the Odyssey left. Yeah?
Uh-huh. Yeah, sure. After this warning, Tiresias's spirit fades back into the mist, and then Odysseus attempts to speak to the spirit of his own mother, but when he tries to embrace her, she slips away. He's then faced with the ghosts of Agamemnon and Achilles, both of which kind of like share their regrets about their own deaths. And he even sees the spirit of Ajax, who was this sort of like Trojan prince, the hero of Troy, but the spirit refuses to speak to him.
Really sad that that's a cleaning product in my mind and not a person with a complex backstory in one of humanity's richest texts.
The whole point of this, he's like, he sees the torments of the dead, and so he is more reinvigorated than ever to return home. So they return back to Circe's island, who then gives him advice on what route to take to get home. There's one point where she's like, you have to go past the sirens. You're going to be tempted to go down this path, which is between Scylla and Charybdis, which we'll talk about in a second. And he's like, well, why can't I do that? She's like, hey, dummy, I just said don't do that. Birds can't even fly through there, and you want to sail a fucking boat? Motherfucker. I want to find that passage. It's genuinely so funny. I answered, Goddess, please, tell me the truth. Is there no other way? Or can I somehow circumvent Charybdis and stop that Scylla when she tries to kill my men? The goddess answered, no, you fool. Your mind is still obsessed with deeds of war, but now you must surrender to the gods.
Yes. Oh my God, Julia, is this poem about PTSD? Kind of.
A little bit. Honestly, yeah, Amanda, if we take into account book 24, I didn't even think about this.
Okay.
Keep that in mind for when we talk about book 24, okay?
Pinning it to myself.
Pin it. Okay. She's like, you got to go past the sirens. He's like, okay. And so we get to the part where they describe the sirens. I love this. We traveled fast, and when we were in earshot of the sirens, they knew our ship was near and started singing. Odysseus, come here. You are well known from many stories, glory of the Greeks. Now stop your ship and listen to our voices. All those who pass this way hear honeyed song poured from our mouths. The music brings them joy, and they go on their way with greater knowledge. since we know everything the Greeks and Trojans suffered in Troy by God's will, and we know whatever happens anywhere on earth.
Man, what a temptation. Like way before the Garden of Eden tale, right? Where we get to understand and really get personified humanity's desire to know more than we think we should. Odysseus is also getting tempted specifically by someone who knows what he's been through. And it sounds like that was such a force animating him.
So Odysseus is like, I know I'm going to have to go past these sirens. So he plans this out, right? Odysseus stuffs his men's ears with wax so they themselves are not lured by the siren song and can keep on paddling. And then he himself wants to hear the siren song, though. So he forces his men to tie him to the mast.
He's a nosy little bitch.
Exactly. So this lets him both hear the siren song and also it lets him inform the men when it's safe that the siren song is no longer audible. And so they manage to survive this challenge, this encounter.
Not through willpower, through rope.
Exactly. But next, they come across the pass where we have the six-headed monster Scylla on one side and the whirlpool Charybdis on the other side.
So Odysseus is going to take the good advice of the hot lady he was banging and not do that passage, right?
No, he 100% does it. 100%. And he loses 6 men in the process because they are devoured when they sail too close to Scylla. They eventually become marooned on this island because the ship is thrown off course by trying to navigate the strait, right? The island that they get marooned on is where Helios keeps his golden cattle, which Tiresias specifically warned Odysseus about.
You're going to see some delicious cows. I'm going to need you not to eat them.
But the problem is, Amanda, his men are starving.
I bet.
And while Odysseus warns them not to harm the cows, while he is sleeping, the men kill the forbidden cattle and eat them all. Essentially, they're like, is it, like one of the men gives this speech and he's like, is it a better death to die of starvation? Or is it better to have like pissed off the gods and to like die a like sort of glorious death in response?
That's really interesting, given this theme of like letting the wartime achievement go and coming to be just like a part of a whole where you have a place in the world that is not trying to conquer someone else. And I mean, Julia, I'm no expert in Greek mythology, but I'd say starving to death is a pretty good way to go compared to a lot of the ways that the gods can kill mortals.
So this is actually, Emily Wilson does a great job kind of describing this in the introduction of her translation of the Odyssey. And so the ringleader of the insurrection, Eurylochus, speaks bravely, urging the others not to worry about the sun god's response. Quote, if he is so angry about these cows that he decides to wreck our ship, and if the other gods agree, I would prefer to drink the sea and die at once than perish slowly, shriveled up here on this desert island. And she continues saying, the language is inspiring, as if from a rousing battle speech. We may well wonder what exactly is wrong with Eurylochus's suggestion. The episode hints at an important idea in the poem, that the willingness to die for honor, which is valued so highly on the battlefield, is not always useful in these strange new worlds.
Ooh, Emily.
Dr.
Wilson, please.
They eat it. You know, and when they go to leave the island, Zeus sends his punishment by way of a shipwreck where all of the men but Odysseus are drowned.
Well, they got to die the way that they wanted to, Julia.
He did say, I would rather drink water, aka drown, than starve here on this desert island.
That is what he did.
He is on the wreckage of the ship, swept back past Charybdis, and Scylla only manages to barely escape their grasps. And then after 10 days of drifting on the wreck of his ship's mast, he lands on the island of Calypso, which is where we first found him.
We're back together.
At this point in the story, we return back to Phaeacia, where Odysseus finishes telling his story to the king and queen, and they offer him, they're like, oh, buddy, that's rough. Take an array of gifts, and hey, we're even going to give you this magical self-steering ship to help you return back to Ithaca.
Well, that's helpful. How'd they get that?
They just had it.
Wow.
They just had it from the gods. It's cool.
Cool.
So exhausted from his journey, he falls into a deep sleep on the way home, and the sailors who are manning this ship gently lay him on the shore of Ithaca before leaving. And when he awakes Amanda, he doesn't even recognize his homeland. And he is approached by a young man who is like, yeah, you're in Ithaca here. And this young man is like, so who are you? What's going on? And Odysseus is like, I'm a stranger from Crete. And he goes, okay, good job. You should be cautious. And then it's like, I'm Athena. And he's like, oh, shit. Hey, Athena.
Nice.
And she basically does this speech. She's like, my beloved Odysseus. Not romantic beloved, just like, oh, God, you're like the embodiment of what I want all mortals to be, you know?
It's good to be a favorite of the gods sometimes. And this is an area where it really is.
So together they hide a bunch of Odysseus's treasures that the Phaeacians gave him in a seaside cave, and they work together to create a plan to get revenge against the suitors. So at this point, Athena transforms him into an old beggar man. Mm-hmm. And it is revealed around this time that this is all happening simultaneously when Telemachus is out searching for news of Odysseus. And so Athena is like, I'm going to go fetch him from Menelaus and Helen's house in Sparta. And so you two can be reunited.
Nice.
So while disguised, Odysseus doesn't go straight to the palace, but rather he visits the swineherd named Eumaeus, just to sort of get a lay of the land, see what's been going on since he's been gone. Eumaeus is an extremely loyal member of his household, right? And Eumaeus, played by John Leguizamo.
John Leguizamo!
Yeah.
Yes!
So that's going to be a really fun role for him. I'm really excited about that.
Incredible. And Julia, I have to be honest, I was a little bit confused when I first sort of understood the plot of the Odyssey. Man, you've been trying to get home for 20 years. Go the fuck home. Why aren't you just going? But this sort of political intrigue, knowing that people have been scheming against him, depleting his household of resources, right? Trying to kind of narrow in on his wife, even plot to kill his son. It makes a lot more sense to me why he would treat this as the final phase of the mission and not just putting off the reuniting.
Yeah, he also he knows about the suitors, but he doesn't know if Penelope has been faithful to him in this time. He doesn't know what the welcome is going to be like when he does finally return home. And so I think it is playing it safe. Athena is right. She's like, yes, be safe about this. You never know who's going to be on your side and who's not, which is why he goes to Eumaeus first, because he's like, Eumaeus has always been one of our most loyal subjects, right?
I hope that translation includes the phrase, my man.
My man. So Eumaeus expresses grief over the state of the lands and his former master, but he has remained loyal to him this entire time, even though he presumes that Odysseus has died, right? And Odysseus, being Odysseus, is like, well, I predict the king will return soon. And Eumaeus is like, maybe. It's been a while. We'll see.
Sure, man. I'd love to think that.
If the gods allow it. Yeah. So regardless, he allows Odysseus to sleep in his swineherd hut. And having no room for himself, he goes out and sleeps with the pigs.
Oh,
Eumaeus.
Good hospitality. Thank you, John.
Meanwhile, Athena finds Telemachus and she's like, girl, you gotta return home. And so he is sent home from Sparta with many gifts from Menelaus and Helen. On the ship home, he meets a man named Theoclymenus, who is both in exile for murder, but also a very gifted prophet. And he gives Telemachus a prophecy that basically his family will continue to hold power in Ithaca. He essentially is like, I saw an eagle killing a dove and it was on your right side, which is a good sign. Mm-hmm. And that's the animal of Apollo, who is the god of prophecy. So I think you and your family are good. Telemachus at that point is like, sweet, thanks, man. And so he puts him in the care of a friend of his in Ithaca rather than invite him back to the palace, because he's like, I got to see what the lay of the land is. I don't want to send you to the palace and then I'm not there and then the suitors are assholes to you, right?
Fair.
He then, upon arriving in Ithaca, also goes to seek out, quote, the herdsman in the field of his estate. And his first stop is, surprise, surprise, Eumaeus' house.
But it's not John Leguizamo, it is Daddy.
Well, so the swineherd greets him and then introduces Telemachus to the stranger that is staying with him. Now, keep in mind, Telemachus was a baby when Odysseus left. He has never really seen his father. He has no actual memories of his father, right?
Yeah.
So Telemachus sends Eumaeus back to the palace to tell Penelope, oh, your son has returned home. And meanwhile, Athena transforms Odysseus back into his normal younger self, and he reveals to Telemachus that he is his father.
Oh, in a swine hut? That's very humbling.
The two are reunited, they weep together, and then, at any family reunion, they start to plan to kill a bunch of people.
It's thank God.
Specifically, the suitors of Penelope.
I don't know about you, Julia. When I go home to visit one of my parents, it is always oh, great. I have a list of questions about my iPhone. I've been waiting for you. And so I think this is Odysseus' version of it. It's oh, thank God. Now we can really conspire to murder.
So Odysseus makes a plan to have Telemachus essentially hide almost all of the weapons in the palace, and also to hide his identity, right? Even from Laertes and from Penelope. Laertes being his father, Penelope the wife, right?
I was going to say, how are they going to do that? And then I remember Athena. He's going to stay in his old beggar disguise. Yeah.
So at the palace, news that Telemachus has arrived back safely reaches the palace. Penelope is relieved. The suitors are God, we were supposed to ambush him. Damn, we still got to get rid of him. They're planning all of this in Penelope's earshot. And she's stop. And they're nah. Around this time, Eumaeus returns home to his swine hut and tells Telemachus and Odysseus that all of the suitors have returned back to the palace. Because again, they were planning to ambush Telemachus. Obviously, that's failed.
Mm-hmm.
So Telemachus returns back to the palace. He's reunited with his mother, and Telemachus's friend brings Theoclymenus to the palace. He's this guy is my guest. We're going to welcome him. We're going to be nice to him. Penelope asks Telemachus a bunch of questions about his journey, but then Theoclymenus interrupts with essentially another prophecy where he goes, oh, I swear by Zeus and hospitality and by the hearth of great Odysseus, the place where I have come. He is already here in Ithaca, at rest or on his way. He must have learned what bad things they were doing, and he is plotting ruin for them all. I know this because I saw a sign while sitting on board the ship. I told Telemachus.
Really revealing the plot when you were just invited to dinner.
Well, sometimes the prophets can't help themselves, right, Amanda?
Yikes.
Meanwhile, Eumaeus, who is alongside Odysseus, who now has been disguised again as the old beggar, start to approach the palace. And as they arrive on the grounds of the palace, Argos, who's a dog that Odysseus had left behind as a puppy 20 years ago to fight in the Trojan War, recognizes his owner after all of these years.
Man.
It's so sad, Amanda, because it's no one is taking care of the dog since Odysseus left, and now he's old and he's sleeping out on the manure pile. And Odysseus is I recognize my dog, and Argus sits up slightly and wags his tail, but Odysseus cannot greet the dog without giving himself away. And so Argus passes, having seen his owner one last time.
No.
Now, I really reminded myself about a lot of the plot points in this story preparing for this episode. When we first saw the trailer, they show baby puppy Argus, and then later adult dog, sad dog Argus in the movie trailer. And Jake looked at me because Jake hates any animal dying. And I had a moment where I'm no, the dog doesn't die. And then 2 weeks later, I was oh shit, the dog does die.
The dog dies famously, tragically, and with no upside.
But to be fair, no one kills the dog. The dog just dies of old age.
Julia, we're splitting hairs here.
I'm just saying.
Oh.
Finally, Odysseus enters his own house, disguised as a beggar. Telemachus greets him, doesn't reveal his identity, and offers him food. But because Odysseus is playing the beggar role, right? He's you should go and approach the suitors and beg for food from them as well.
Mm-hmm.
Now, each of the suitors gives him essentially scraps, bad hospitality, except for Antinous, who hurls a stool at him, worse hospitality.
Wow, thanks, Robert Pattinson. Stoked for him to play a dickbag. That's going to be really fun.
Yeah, he's going to be a really good dickbag. Odysseus curses him, but he is interrupted by Penelope, who begs her disguised husband to give her news about, surprise, surprise, her husband. But Odysseus, not wanting to reveal himself too soon, puts off the conversation. What's interesting is we talked earlier on about the interiority of Penelope. We don't know when Penelope starts to suspect that this is Odysseus. We don't know. She's going to issue a challenge later. We don't know if she issues the challenge knowing Odysseus is there, or if it is just like, I don't think any man but Odysseus could do this, and that's why she poses the challenge.
Fascinating.
But we'll see. At this point, we should talk a little bit more about Melantho, Mia Goth, right? So, like I said, she is one of the slave women that attends to Penelope. She is one of the women who is sleeping with the suitors while they are occupying the palace. She is specifically described as being the mistress of Eurymachus, who's like the second in command of the suitors, right?
Mm-hmm.
She is also the one that reveals to the suitors the trick about Penelope and the unraveling of the loom at night. We see her be quite rude several times to Odysseus while he is in this beggar form, right? She dismisses him. She tells him that he should be sleeping in the like smithy, which is where people are supposed to stay if they are like just happen to come into Ithaca, rather than him being welcomed as a beggar into the halls of the palace. And so we see like several times, like several characters admonishing Melantho, who does not sort of continue the hospitality that the household should be giving guests.
Got it. So it sounds like in the text, there's evidence for her as kind of like a traitor of the household and the household's values in multiple ways.
Yes, and we see that explicitly called out by Odysseus. He's enraged because he like sleeps in the hall that night. And he sees several of the household women, the household slaves, going to the sleeping quarters of the suitors. And this like enrages him pretty substantially.
Yeah.
It's sort of important to remember that she's playing a very key role here.
My instinct is to like find something relatable in those characters' choices. And I understand why for like individual social advancement, it could really benefit you to be on the side of like the person who could be your employer, who could determine if you are, I don't know, dismissed or executed or, you know, something else like that if the regime changes. But knowing the kind of hospitality and loyalty and fidelity themes of it all, I see why this is a big deal.
Yes. It's also like interesting because you could see where Melantho might want her mistress to take a new husband in order to just simply keep the household steady and safe, because there is a lot of flux happening in this like place where Penelope is and is not married, and that puts the rest of the household under threat as well.
Totally.
Interesting to see. Very interested to see how Mia Goth is going to portray this role. So at this point, inspired by a message from Athena, Penelope announces that she is finally ready to marry one of the suitors, and she like reveals her full beauty upon them because, as I mentioned before, up until this point, she's mainly hiding behind a veil. And so while discussing her choice to finally marry a suitor, Odysseus is talking to one of the suitors and like implies something terrible is going to happen to them. And this suitor at one point is like, maybe I should leave. And then Athena comes to him and says, no, you should stay, because she wants to punish them. Essentially, they all become way too focused on Penelope's announcement rather than heeding the warning that Odysseus is kind of laying here, right?
Sure.
So they have one last drink. They all return to their beds. And then in the night, Athena makes a magic light shine in the hall, and it brings both Odysseus and Penelope to come and like seek out what that light is, and they like find each other in the hall.
Aw.
So Penelope, again, it's unclear if she recognizes Odysseus in this disguise, right? Tells him about her weaving trick, how she manages to keep these suitors off her for as long as she could. And then Odysseus, in return, claims this sort of false narrative about how he is from Crete and how he met Odysseus in his travels. And so she begins to weep, and he's like, Don't cry. Your husband's going to be back real soon.
Like maybe like between tomorrow and now is what I would guess.
He like specifically says within the month. And I'm like, all right, cool, sure. Like, don't give her too much hope. You don't know how long your charade's going to last. So as like a sort of like thank you and good hospitality for like thank you for like encouraging me and making me feel better, she offers him a warm bed, and he refuses. But he's like, it would be nice, though, if like someone like washed my feet, right?
Sure.
Again, another like sign of hospitality.
Mm-hmm.
And so the oldest slave woman in the house, whose name is Eurycleia, she was the one who essentially like raised Telemachus as her own son. I believe she was also like a mistress of Laertes, who's Odysseus's father.
Mm.
And so she has known Odysseus his entire life, right? And so she takes up the task. And in doing so, as she's washing Odysseus's feet, she sees a scar on his leg from his childhood that leads to her recognizing him.
Oh.
And so realizing that she's recognizing him because she just starts crying, right? He's like, you have to keep my identity a secret. And so when he and Penelope speak again, she shares to him like, oh, I've really been suffering all of these years. I miss my husband. I had this dream in which a gander of geese is killed by an eagle. And then she tells him that she plans to set up a contest between the suitors in the morning. And here's how she describes it. I will arrange a contest with his axes, Odysseus's axes. He would set them all in a row like ship's props. From a distance, he shot an arrow through all 12 of them. I will assign this contest to the suitors. Whoever strings his bow most readily and shoots through all 12 axes will win me, and I will follow him. I will be parted from here, this lovely house, my marriage home, so full of wealth and life, which I suppose I will remember even in my dreams.
Now, Julia, if I had to recognize you by sort of like feat of skill, that nobody else could do, what is it? I think it's important that we plan this now, just in case we're ever in this position.
I think it'd be blind taste testing cheeses.
Oh, Julia. So right. So right. Okay, great.
Or just like being able to make a last word without consulting a recipe. What about you, Amanda?
Explain an economic concept using Pokemon.
Perfect. Got it. Nailed it.
Tell me who else could do that.
Truly no one.
Thank you.
So with that, the night closes, and then the next morning, our three main characters wake up very anxious. Pretty much everyone is anxious except the suitors, right? The house is prepared for a special feast, and while the suitors reconsider their plot to kill Telemachus, they're like, maybe we don't have to kill him. We should get rid of him. We don't have to kill him. The guy's kind of a weakling. Like, it's fine, right? So Telemachus brings Odysseus in the beggar form to the feast, warns the suitors not to abuse him. One of them throws an ox foot at him.
Oh, my God.
Like leftover from, I guess, the food that they're eating.
That'll pack a punch.
And Telemachus begins to reprimand them. And as he does, Athena fucks with them a little. So the quote is, Athena turned the suitors' minds. They laughed unstoppably. They cackled and they lost control of their faces. Plates of meat began to drip with blood. Their eyes were full with tears and they began to wail in grief.
Whoa.
So Theoclymenus, the prophet from earlier, says that this is another sign from the gods. And the suitors are like, what? No. And just like kind of continue laughing at him, right?
Yikes.
And so he's like, I don't want anything to do with this. This seems like it's about to go real bad real fast. And so he just leaves.
Very important in Greek mythology and in life, Julia, to know when to leave. Rarely will things go wrong because you're like, you know what? I'm gonna go to bed.
Listen, as a person who is team investigate, every once in a while I'll watch a horror movie where I have a moment in the movie where I'm like, I would have stopped investigating at this point. You should not have continued doing what you're doing right now. Something was wrong here and you should have realized that.
You can always go to bed, is what I'm saying.
Theoclymenus was like, I am not staying here. I'm going to bed. Goodbye. So at this point, Penelope has the slaves set up the axes for the contest and brings forth Odysseus's bow, unstrung. So Telemachus is the first to try to string it. He cannot do it. Odysseus has to like put a hand on his shoulder, be like, I think you should stop trying. Several suitors try, but to no avail. At one point, Antinous is like, we should have grease. We'll grease it up so it'll be easier. But like everyone tries, including Eurymachus, to string the bow and fails. And finally, it's just Antinous left, right? And he's like, I don't think we should be holding this contest today because it is the feast day of Apollo, the god of archery. And so it doesn't seem right that we attempt this trial right now.
I mean, I agree for what it's worth.
he's like, we should wait until tomorrow. And Odysseus, still in this beggar costume, is like, right, the contest should definitely be tomorrow. Can I get a chance to try and string the bow? And the suitors are like, no, absolutely not. No way. But Penelope is like, why not let him try? And at this point, Telemachus is like scolding his mother. He's like, Mother, you shouldn't tell the men whether or not this guy in our household can enter the contest. Go upstairs. And Penelope's like, okay, and then goes upstairs. It's a lot of Telemachus scolding Penelope and then telling her to go upstairs in the Odyssey.
This is extremely funny when you know that it's Tom Holland scolding Anne Hathaway to like get the upstairs mother. And I'm sure after every take, Tom Holland was like, I'm so sorry.
So Odysseus is given the bow, and all the while Penelope goes upstairs. All these people who have been aligned with Odysseus start to trap the suitors in the hall.
Oh.
Penelope is upstairs. Eurycleia, who's the older slave woman who knew Odysseus from her childhood, puts away all of the women into a separate hall so that they don't get involved in what's about to happen. Odysseus is given the bow, and he strings it with ease, and he shoots through all of the axes.
Delicious.
The suitors are shocked, and Antinous lifts his wine cup to kind of like be like, hey, good job, man. And this is when Odysseus and Telemachus attack. Odysseus rips off his rags to reveal his true nature, totally naked, by the way. And then shoots Antinous through the neck. Now, at this point, Eurymachus is like, you must be Odysseus. I recognize you, right?
My full bad, man.
He's like, you know what? You killed the guy whose fault this all was. Antinous was behind this the whole time. He was the one leading all of these suitors. You've gotten your justice. Let us go. And Odysseus is like, no, you all fucked up. And Eurymachus is like, hey, man, fair. Suitors, fight. They have no weapons. Telemachus hit all the weapons, as they set up earlier. And so at this point, they're like trying to defend themselves with just like tables and side tables and like chairs and stuff. Odysseus shoots Eurymachus through the nipple into the liver, which is not where the liver is, by the way.
I guess if you like shoot from like above, maybe you can hit the liver.
I don't know, man. It didn't work. And then at this point, Telemachus and Odysseus begin to slaughter the suitors and are joined by Athena, who once again takes the form of mentor to assist them. When all of the suitors are dead, Odysseus then, and this is the stuff where we're talking about, you know, women's bodies and how like the women slaves in particular in the story are sort of like used as symbolism. Odysseus calls for the killing of all of the women who chose to sleep with the suitors. He wants to essentially like hack them to bits, gathers them all up and hangs them.
I wonder what they're going to do in the movie.
What they're going to do is they're going to make Melantho into a villain, which, depending on your reading of it, could be true, could be not true. And they're definitely going to do the hanging part, at least for her. We'll see what happens. The rest of the women at this point who did not, quote unquote, betray the household, then greet their old master with tears and, you know, happiness and whatnot. Meanwhile, Eurycleia has gone upstairs to talk to Penelope and tells her this beggar that was in our halls is in fact your husband and also has killed all of your suitors. And Penelope tells her, like, I'm reluctant to believe you that is the truth. It has been 20 years. I don't know how I feel about this, whether or not this is or isn't my husband, right? Again, Telemachus scolds her for her disbelief, but Odysseus is like, listen, whether you believe it or not, 20 years is a long time. You're absolutely right. I think we will come to recognize each other again in like these secret little ways. Penelope's like, okay, sure. Well, until I know you are my husband, until I truly believe that, Eurycleia, can you go into my bedroom and take the bed frame out of my room and make up a bed for this guest? Now, this alarms Odysseus because he then tells a story about how, as a wedding gift, he carved her bed frame himself out of a still living tree that grew in the middle of the palace. So it would be impossible to move unless the tree itself was cut down. And so when he says that, Penelope is like, oh, you are my husband. The two weep, they are reunited, and they go to bed together where he tells her a slightly edited version of his adventures.
Oh.
This is where a lot of people end the story. There is another chapter to this. This is book 24. And essentially, it's a little like all over the place. It doesn't like make a ton of sense. Like the scene that we just described is sort of like a perfect closure to the story in my mind. This chapter starts with a scene where all of the like dead heroes that we saw in the underworld scene are like talking to each other in Hades.
Yeah.
And then one of the suitors arrives down there and is talking to Achilles and Agamemnon and saying like, oh, Odysseus killed a bunch of us. And Agamemnon's like, man, Odysseus' wife stayed loyal to him? Jealous. And then at this point, we return back to Ithaca. Odysseus reveals to his father Laertes that he is still alive after like, again, like doing this thing of being like, oh, I'm just a stranger from Crete. And then Laertes eventually recognizes him, right?
Oh.
And then news of the suitors getting murdered gets out to the Ithacans. And many of them were like the fathers and the family members of a bunch of these suitors. So they want revenge on Odysseus for the slaughter.
Yeah.
However, at this point, the gods, Athena and Zeus specifically, decide that Odysseus should be king of Ithaca. And so they help him kill a bunch of these men who would rise up against him. And eventually, Athena has to go so far as to even restrain Odysseus from killing more men because he is so eager to keep killing. And the story just like sort of ends there.
Oh, damn.
Calling back to your like PTSD thing of like how war changes you as a person and like, you know, is the Odysseus that returned home to Ithaca the same Odysseus that left for the Trojan War? The answer is absolutely no.
Julia, you could say that he's, I don't know, Theseus is shit maybe as a person. If every single constituent part of him changes, the same person. I don't know. It's what's that line where it's like, show me a person that does not change and I will show you a corpse. Mm-hmm.
I would say Odysseus has changed by the end of this.
But I see your point, though, because one, this is giving like epilogue where people were unhappy with a happy or ambiguous ending. And so they wanted like a follow up of like, but what happens to all these people? And so I'm curious if like maybe some tellers of this tale, which was originally, you know, orally transmitted, it's like fanon that they added in at the end. Or I wonder if this is exactly as you say, kind of bringing us back to the fact that, you know, war changes people, life changes people, you know, experiences and trauma. You are not going to be the same person at the end of it as you were at the beginning. And specifically, like people, you know, bred and rewarded for violence may have a really hard time putting that down and settling into a different kind of life. And I like, too, the sort of, you know, the inception top turning of it all, sort of asking us at the end, like, has Odysseus learned his lessons? Can he sate his impulses? Is he bound for a life of, you know, peace and prosperity? Or, I don't know, does he invite his own trouble in some ways?
I have my doubts that Christopher Nolan is going to keep this last chapter of the book in. I don't think it really like adds much to his story. And as we know, Christopher Nolan thinks he's a wife guy. So having the story end with them being reunited and him recalling the tale and essentially doing the oral tradition of telling his story, I think that would be the way to end that tale.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Amanda, that was a lot. Obviously, I'm looking at our time as we're recording here. Do you have any questions about the story itself, how Christopher Nolan is going to adapt this? Is there anything that you would want to know going into this movie before we wrap up this episode?
I think my main question was about how the movie would be structured. And it makes sense to me that you cast somebody like Matt Damon to narrate a good portion of this movie. I didn't actually realize that a lot of this text was told in first-person perspective by Odysseus, because the beginning chapters, which I have read more of than the rest, are like, let me tell you about this tale of this man and doing whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I'm just mostly really curious to see how the relationships that are underdeveloped in the text, Penelope's interiority, Helen's interiority, the relationship between Telemachus and his mom, like is that a mother-son relationship? Is he like a young man trying to take on a burden that was too large for him? I think there's a lot of license here for the actors that have been cast in these roles to make really interesting choices. I'm just curious to see how all of it unfolds.
Yeah, I am as well. I definitely am looking forward to seeing this movie. which I say as someone who enjoys Greek mythology, who enjoys most Christopher Nolan movies. I am like genuinely stoked to sit down and watch this with like zero expectation, really. I think a lot of people who are Greek mythology enjoyers are reacting in a way that I don't personally feel. Like, they're keeping the story as precious. And it is a like incredibly important story historically, mythologically, narratively. And also, I think it is totally fine for us to do interesting translations and adaptations of these stories. They don't have to be point for point accurate to exactly how the original ancient Greek story was told, which we don't even really know how the original ancient Greek story was told because it was told through oral tradition. So we have to like kind of take that with a grain of salt and remember that it is a story and not history.
Well said. This is a translation of a translation of a translation of trying to capture a thing that was ultimately an in-person, orally transmitted, and contextually understood experience. So I am really curious, Julia, the mission of this show, right, is to ask ourselves, what stories have human beings told one another to understand the world and our place in it, and what relevance do those stories still have today? And the answer, year after year, episode after episode, as we close in on episode 500 here, coming home to port in Ithaca, is the stories matter, even and especially as we change. And so what this story looks like to a bunch of people in 2026 going to a movie theater in the height of summer to watch people whose faces we understand and an auteur whose perspective, I think a lot of us, even the film heads out there, of course, you know all the directors and whatever, but like a lot of us know a Christopher Nolan movie.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see what version this is. And if it inspires y'all to pick up Emily Wilson's incredible translation, if it inspires you to listen to more Greek mythology related episodes of this podcast, or just to kind of think a little more critically about the stories we tell ourselves and why they last, I think that's a win.
I believe so as well. I'm really excited. I think it is important for there to be entryways for people to learn about stories like this and to enjoy them. I know one of the big criticisms was like, why do they all have American accents? That's a whole other story about like the default of like people in historical movies have to have British accents. And no one was going to be watching that movie if everyone was speaking ancient Greek. And also, I don't want to see Matt Damon try to speak ancient Greek.
Sure don't.
So I think it is just like, I'm excited for how this is going to make Greek mythology accessible to people. And I am excited that people are going to seek out more Greek mythology when they never had an interest in it before after seeing this.
Well, folks, come on over to the Patreon to see what Julia and I think. This movie comes out on July 17th, and we will review it soon after on the Patreon, patreon.com/spiritspodcast. And in the meantime, if you found this helpful, send this episode to the person you are going to go watch this movie with. That way you know all of the twists and turns to look out for.
Absolutely. And remember, the next time you are stuck between a Scylla and a Charybdis, stay creepy.
Stay cool.
Later, satyrs.